Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, HRS Psychosocial Data which is developed and presented by the University of Michigan with funds from the National Institute on Aging and hosted by GSA. The webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the GSA website. Notice all attendees will be distributed once the recording is available. A question and answer session will immediately follow the live presentation, and we will be accepting questions through the questions feature accessible on the GoToWebinar panel. Also located there are downloadable handouts for today, the webinar speaker bios, and a copy of the presentation slides. While I introduce our speakers for today, please tell us who you are by answering the poll that will appear on your screen momentarily. It is coming up now. So the formal presentation will be given by our first speaker, Dr. Amanda Sonnega, Associate Research Scientist in the Survey Research Center of the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan. Joining Amanda in the question and answer session will be Jacqui Smith, the HRS co-investigator who leads the development of HRS psychosocial content, and Lindsay Ryan, who is a key member of the HRS psychosocial group. Thank you, Amanda, Jacqui, and Lindsay for bringing us this important program. Okay, so let's close the poll now and show the results. There we go. All right, let me close that up. And without further delay, I'd like to hand the microphone over to Amanda.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today for the webinar, which will provide information on the psychosocial data in the HRS and guidance on using them. I'm going to begin with a bit of background and some notes on the design. So initially, the assessment of psychosocial issues in aging was not a goal of the HRS. In 2003, the NIA HRS Data Monitoring Committee commissioned a report by Carol Riff of the University of Wisconsin which described the research opportunities from expansion into this area. The HRS Psychosocial Working Group was formed to develop content for the psychosocial questionnaire. The first pilot was launched in 2004, and the first full questionnaire was fielded in 2006 as part of the design of the new enhanced face-to-face interview. In late 2006, Jacqui Smith joined the HRS as a co-investigator. This graphic depicts the steady-state design of the enhanced face-to-face interview. Each HRS wave, a rotating random 50% subsample of the longitudinal panel, is scheduled for this enhanced interview that includes the psychosocial questionnaire, together with collection of physical and biomarker assessments. A indicates the first random 50% subsample of the panel assigned to the enhanced face-to-face in 2006, and B indicates the second 50% that was first assigned to the enhanced face-to-face interview in 2008. The half samples then alternate waves so that A has the enhanced interview again in 2010 and B gets it in 2012 and so on. This means that while core survey data are available every wave on the full sample, the physical, biomarker, and psychosocial measures are available every wave on only half of the full core sample, either A or B. One implication of this design is that longitudinal information from the enhanced face-to-face interview is available at 4-year instead of 2-year intervals. So now we have 8-year longitudinal data for subsample A that includes 2006, 8, and 14, and for B that includes 2008, 12, and 16. The questionnaire is formally titled the Participant Lifestyle Questionnaire and was referred to as the PLQ. At the end of the enhanced face-to-face interview, the interviewer leaves the PLQ behind with participants to complete on their own time and return by mail. Because of this, its nickname became the Leave Behind, and indeed its section letters on the HRS website are LB for Leave Behind. You also hear it sometimes referred to as the SAQ for Self-Administered Questionnaire. In coupled households, both members of the couple are asked to complete the questionnaire. Eligibility criteria have changed slightly over time. Table 1 in the online user guide, which we'll talk about in a moment, summarizes them. Lastly, new cohorts in 2010 and 2016 have been added to the rotating subsamples. So initial response rates in 2006 and 2008 for the PLQ were high. However, 2010 and 2016 were lower, with new cohorts completing up to 3-hour-long baseline interviews. Also, the response rates for the newly recruited respondents were lower in those years. Interviewers are trained to emphasize the importance of the psychosocial questionnaire to respondents and the value of having repeated measures for these items. The higher response rates in 2004 suggest that interviewer efforts may have paid off. This chart shows the higher initial response rates, the drop in the cohort enrollment years, and the rebound following interviewer efforts. So HRS generates separate weight variables to be used when using the psychosocial data. The psychosocial weight variables adjust for non-response and are post-stratified to yield weighted results that are population representative. They are generated for respondents who were eligible for the PLQ in a given wave and who completed a questionnaire. The weight variables are available in the tracker file and are called XLBWGTR, where X is the variable in the variable name denotes the wave. As always, use them in conjunction with stratum and CQ, which are also in tracker. The psychosocial questionnaire core data file, section LB, for each wave includes a set of indicators that identify the eligibility and completion status for the psychosocial questionnaire in that wave. The indicators are defined as XLBR type for respondent type, where X is the wave indicator, XLB elig for eligibility, and XLB comp for completion. And you can see the response options for those variables here. The code frame for the respondent type indicator in part reflects the fact that the eligibility criteria have changed over time. The code frame for the completion variable similarly shows the option, which is no longer available, of completing the interview by phone. Note that you can have participants who are 1 on the completion variable, but also 1 on the type variable. So this is one way you can find cases that you might not want to include in your analysis, but they should be very few in number. So the type variable is sort of a combination of eligibility and mode. Now I want to turn to talking about the content. Note that this presentation does not represent an exhaustive review of the content, but it's meant to tempt you to learn more. We'll begin with a high-level overview, then touch on a few measures. I want to note that all this detail and more are in the user guide on the HRS website entitled The HRS Psychosocial and Lifestyle Questionnaire 2006 to 2016 by Smith et al. In that guide, for each measure, you will find the question number in a particular wave, some source and background citations, and information on coding, scaling, and alpha coefficients. It's important to note that some questions and scales have been added, removed, or altered since 2006, so be sure to check Table 3 in the user guide, which is a cross-wave concordance table. I think one of the most fun things is to read through the questionnaires, which you can access at this link. When you click on the link, scroll down to section LB and click on any given wave. Note that the questionnaire for 2018 is on the website, but the data are not yet available. This slide displays the 6 major domains of content with the specific topics listed in each domain. Measures with an asterisk next to them are not in every wave. Lifetime traumas and some early life experiences were asked once and then will be asked of new cohort participants. In the domain of social support, one set of questions asks about both positive and negative aspects of relationships. These seven questions are asked of the participant about their relationships with their spouse or partner, their children, and their friends and relatives. This graph shows the age cohort trend in participants' relationships with their children. So you can see that positive support increases and negative support from children decreases at older ages. The PLQ also includes the Big 5 personality inventory with the dimensions of openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. 2 subscales of conscientiousness were added in 2010 that capture impulsivity and thriftiness. Researchers use the personality constructs in a number of different ways. These papers use data from the PLQ on personality in combination with information from the biomarker assessment. Jacqui et al. Find a relationship between conscientiousness and less inflammation. And Stefan et al. Find that higher allostatic load, which is indicated by a range of biomarker and physical measures, is related to declines in extroversion, conscientiousness, and agreeableness over 4 years. Another major domain of measurement is stress. The PLQ assesses major stressful life events in the past 5 years, including job loss, unemployment for more than 3 months, anyone in their household unemployed for more than 3 months, a move to a worse neighborhood, being robbed, or being the victim of fraud. It's important to note that several major life events have been available in the core survey since 1992. With the longitudinal core information, you can create variables to indicate, for example, unemployment, financial losses, widowhood, and new health diagnoses. There's also measurement of lifetime traumas, which includes child death, natural disaster, combat, spouse or child drug addiction, physical attack, life-threatening illness, and spouse or child life-threatening illness. These only need to be assessed once, as I mentioned, so by 2012, all cohorts then in the study had been asked these questions, and they were then removed from the PLQ. New cohorts will be asked them along with other questions about early life experiences in the new Life History Male Survey, which is itself a topic for another day. There's also measurement of current stress, such as ongoing problems with health, housing, and financial strain. There's also current job stress. Another area of stress measurement relates to experiences of discrimination, including major, lifetime, and everyday discrimination. This shows the questions asked as part of the 6-item everyday discrimination scale about such things as you were treated with less courtesy or respect than other people, people act as if they think you are not smart, and so on. Then, if any of those things happened, respondents are asked what they think the reasons are, and you can see the range of potential reasons. Guyson, Queen, Larkina, and Smith used these data to study the relationship to self-perceptions of aging. They found that people in midlife reported more experiences of discrimination, but were less likely to attribute it to their age. Viewing their own aging positively was associated with less perceived age discrimination. And this graphic shows more detail on the first finding. You can see reports of no discrimination decrease at older ages, and age as the only attribution increases. In the domain of self-related beliefs, a very commonly used measure is control beliefs, which has the subscales of perceived constraints and perceived mastery. In addition to general control beliefs, the PLQ also measures domain-specific beliefs in terms of health, social life, and work. These graphics show the age trend in mastery and constraints, showing that perceived constraints tend to increase at older ages and mastery tends to decrease at older ages. Another self-related belief in the PLQ is optimism-pessimism. Kim, Chopix, and Smith leveraged the dyadic nature of the data to examine spouses' effects on each other in terms of optimism, and found that one's own optimism positively influenced one's health, but over and above that, spouses' optimism also positively influenced one's health. Another major domain is subjective well-being. Since 2012, the PLQ has included measures of time use and experienced well-being using a modified day reconstruction questionnaire for the day before today. This includes wake times and sleep times, self-rated health yesterday, and general questions about yesterday, such as experienced pain, felt refreshed upon awakening, and whether or not yesterday represented a normal routine for the participant. Then there's a list of activities and time spent doing each of them. For each activity, the questionnaire asks the participant to rate how they felt during that activity, including happy, interested, content, frustrated, bored, sad, and pain. Smith et al. Used these data to study mixtures of affective experiences in a day. They found that older adults reported that most of their activities provided a mixture of feelings. Newton et al. Used these data in combination with the personality measures to study the effect of personality on the relationship between activities and related emotions. Interestingly, they found that extroverts, as you might expect, felt more positive about socializing, but they did not spend more time socializing. Finally, we'll turn to some practical guidance on using the data. The simplest way to use the data is as is, and you have a few different options. Most simply, you can use each wave for cross-sectional analysis. Each wave of psychosocial data from 2006 to 2016 is 1/2 of the core sample and, using the weight variable, yields nationally representative results in that wave. The other way you can use the data most simply is to use it longitudinally. When change in a psychosocial variable is of interest, for example, in a growth curve model, you now have 3 longitudinal data points. Just remember that longitudinal information is every 4 years. Another use would be where a psychosocial variable is predicting an outcome from the core in the next biennial wave. So, for example, you might have mastery in 2006, predicting self-rated health in 2008, and again, you would just use the same half sample from the core that completed the PLQ in 2006. Another common way to use the data is to take the 2 half samples and combine them by stacking them as depicted in this graphic. So if you wanted the entire sample, from the core, you can combine these 2 waves. So the combined would be a 2006-2008 wave. To do this, you begin by preparing the 2 separate wave data sets, for example, in this example, 2006 and 2008. Then you rename the variables that are common to both data sets so they match. Note that this is also how you would combine the weights from these 2 subsamples. When you merge the 2 data sets by HHIDPN, they will then concatenate or stack, is another way to put it. So we provide here the SAS code to stack 2 ways. The data sets that are bolded and a larger font are the data set names from the HRS website. Other data set names we've made up for this example, and you can use whatever name makes sense to you. So in step 1, you're going to create and sort the 2006 data. For this example, we're just going to keep one variable, KL037A. Note that we're also keeping the assignment variable, KEFTF assigned. And remember that K is the wave indicator for 2006. And we will sort by HHIDPN. Then we'll only keep cases that were assigned to the 2006 interview, which for this variable is a 2. Then, if you really wanted to clean up the data set so that there was no missing, these next statements allow you to do that. However, if you're using weights, you should not do this, as various sub-pop commands are preferred. And for more on this, I refer you to the March 2009 webinar, the 2019 webinar on weights. Then in step 2, we're going to rename the variable in preparation for combining it with 2008. A simple way to do this, if all but the wave indicator is the same for a given variable, is to just drop the wave indicator letter. If the variable name changes, however, over time, as some do in the PLQ, you'll need to make up a new name. Then, in step 3, we repeat the statements from step 1, except now for the 2008 wave. Step 4 does the rename for the 2008 data. And step 5, at last, merges the 2 data sets you've created, and with the variables renamed, they will now stack. You can also combine data from both members of a couple, which allows you to do actor-partner interdependence models. You're essentially joining files to add information from the spouse's interview to the respondent's record. Note that this is how the RAND longitudinal files are already set up. First, you'll create a spouse file where you will change person number, PN, to the spouse partner person number, or XPPN, where X is a wave indicator. Then you will rename the variables by adding a spouse identifier. We're going to use the PLQ variable KLB005A, which is the question, how much does your partner understand the way you feel? We're going to rename it KLB005AS. Then we'll keep only HHID, the new PN, and the new spouse variable of interest. And here's the SAS code to do that. So in step 1, we're creating and sorting the spouse PLQ file with our one variable and HHIDPN. Then our spouse partner person number is in the tracker file, so in step 2, we will pull that in from tracker and sort that file as well. We will also merge our 2-variable tracker dataset and our 2-variable PLQ file, and we'll call our merged dataset PLQ 2006 spouse. In step 3, we will rename the PN to the spouse, partner, person number. Then, in step 4, we will create our new spouse variable by adding an S onto the end of the variable name. Then we're going to drop the original variable name. In step 5, we're going to delete any cases that are not coupled, which is the code 000 for the spouse, partner, person number variable. Recall that we renamed PPN to PN, so when we do that, we'll use PN. In step 6, we will sort PLQ 2006 spouse by HHID PN. Then, in step 7, we will merge PLQ 2006 spouse back into the original data set, which was HRS 06 couple. In equals A in the merge statement, and if A in the by statement will allow us to keep only those cases who were in our original data set, HRS 2006 couple. And I didn't put a slide about it, but and now we're going to take your questions. Be delighted to take your questions. But I want to emphasize that any questions we don't get to here, we will your questions will be forwarded to us, and we'll be able to answer later. And really, any time of the day, any day of the year, please don't hesitate to email hrsquestions@umich.edu. And those questions, if the help desk can't answer them, they come to me, they come to Jacqui, they come to Lindsay. So we'll get your questions answered.
Great, thank you, Amanda. So just a reminder to everyone that you can type and send questions using that questions feature in the dashboard accessible on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll not be using the raise hand feature today, so if you have a question, please be sure to use that question panel. We are recording the session, so we'll send you an access link by email once the recording is available. And that URL is the geron.org/webinar. Also, please know a webinar survey will automatically launch after the webinar. In an effort for continual improvement, we'd like to hear your thoughts. So please provide feedback by clicking that survey link at the end of the program. Okay, just give a couple of seconds for questions to come in. In the meantime, are there any important points you'd like to remind everyone while we wait for attendees to type their questions?
I guess the user guide, to really emphasize two things. One would be for any one of the data products, all HRS data products have a data description associated with them, and the same is true for the psychosocial data. So each wave has a data description associated with that, and I just want to remind people of all the really good information that's there, and the user guide. I guess another thing I didn't mention that's on the website for those who prefer more narrative description, Jacqui and I wrote a chapter for an encyclopedia entry on the HRS data resources, and that's also right next to the HRS user guide in the on the HRS website.
Great, those are good tips. Here is a question. If I am combining data from the veteran study in 2013, do you recommend that I stack 2010 and 2012 or 2012 and 2014?
So the user is wanting to combine
with an off-wave study.
Yeah, with an off-wave. Okay,
I guess it depends how you want to do it. So if you want to, if your idea was to look at associations versus, temporal predictions. If you want the data, the psychosocial data to be a predictor, it doesn't make sense to have it after the veterans data. If you just want to look at sort of like what we consider cross-sectional associations, I think that would be fine, how you recommended. But if you want it as a predictor, it doesn't make sense to have it at the end. You want it before.
Right.
So it depends on the question.
It depends on the question. And the other thing is that the new cohort came in 2010, and many of the older cohorts who may have been in the Second World War, for example, maybe were no longer alive and answering the PLQ, but then they probably wouldn't have done the veteran survey either. So, yeah, it really depends on your question.
But the new cohort in 2010 would have been too young for Vietnam veterans. They would already be in the study.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it really depends on.
But that's certainly a reasonable approach. I would just say think carefully about your question and if the temporal order.
Mm-hmm.
So it is an interesting thing because this question is very interesting and probably relevant to a lot of other contexts when you're using the anything from the enhanced face-to-face interview. Is that off your study actually came between. So say you had an outcome from the veterans. It was an outcome in the veterans survey.
Mm-hmm.
The question also is, would you stack 12 and 14? Well, 12 would have been before the survey, so I don't think I would do that.
So I would say if you have enough
sample.
If you have enough power with the half sample, it's much cleaner, definitely.
Yeah.
Right, and you probably also need to look at the sampling frame for that veteran because they bring in some people who might have done the enhanced face-to-face and other people who haven't, right? So,
right.
I admit to not knowing much about how that.
Yeah, I don't either. But again, read the data description for the veteran survey very carefully.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. It's really important to think about the sampling, who was brought in.
Well, and that's for any off-wave study that you're thinking about combining. That's important.
Right.
So
and there are a lot of very interesting ones too. So.
Yeah.
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Next question. Do people who use this data tend to limit it to those who completed it themselves? Variable XLB comp. Who else might fill it out and why?
It's important also to look at the very last item in the questionnaire, which also asks, the comp is basically, was it returned by mail or not? And whereas the very last item in the questionnaire asks people, were the questions in this book that answered by the person whose name is on the front cover? Yes, by themselves, but sometimes then there's an option, yes, the person whose name is on the front cover answered the questions, but someone else assisted by writing the answers for that person. So we know that some of our older participants, for example, have hand arthritis
or vision problems.
Yeah. And so they ask their spouse or a child to write in things for them. We can see that on the returned questionnaires, there's some very shaky writing there, but people really try to do their best. So I think it's important to look at that, but then there's another option. No, the person whose name is on the front cover did not answer or complete this question. Now, we have to rely on people being honest there, of course. So, that's the same with all of the off-year mail surveys as well. So it's exactly the same sort of question, and it's useful to do a bit of detective work
but particularly for psychosocial type questions, I know personally I tend to not include cases where somebody else answered the questions for the respondent. Like, think of it as like a proxy. Because do you think that somebody, like a spouse saying how satisfied with life is your wife versus the wife answering that question? It's very possible. These are subjective questions. So, it's up to the data user, but I tend to exclude them because I only like those responses that are from the respondent specifically.
Yes.
As to common practice, I would say, when you're reviewing papers that are in the online bibliography that use the psychosocial data, you should look at the methods section and see if people. My guess is, by and large, they're mute on the question, but you might see some practice there. I don't know that there is anything that's common practice. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, before we end the program, may I ask Amanda, Jacqui, and Lindsay if there's one takeaway that or learning or common question you've heard asked from time to over time that you'd like to share with the audience?
So, just speaking from getting questions from the HRS Quest email, which I recommend everybody do. Probably the most frequent one I see are people that get confused about the longitudinal flow because it's different. It's not every 2 waves for each person. So it's just, and again, it just takes working with it and remembering. And I'm also going to point people to a table in the documentation report that pretty simply, let's see, what table is it? There it is. That illustrates, because not all of our scales are in every single wave. Some have been added, some have gone. So table 3 in the user guide will really help you see what measures we have consistently over time. So if you're thinking about a longitudinal analysis, I find this table very, very helpful. This table was Jacqui's idea, and it was a great addition to the user guide. So, you have to think every 4 waves for longitudinal, and you can look at this table to see really what possibilities are there. And I look at it all the time because I don't remember. So, we don't expect everybody to have.
And also, I would also highly recommend that that users download the user guide, because that will provide you with a lot of information about the source of each of the scales. It provides you with a citation for those sources, and it also provides you with some citations with more background information or various researchers who've been using these. So
reliabilities as well.
The reliabilities. This just, and also suggestions about creating a scale, since the data are released just item by item. So we provide some very simple, not complex. Of course, users can do their own analyses. But just some simple guides on that. And, this is about the 70-page PDF. It holds a lot of information.
And we reference it ourselves all the time. All the time, yeah.
So I highly recommend reading that.
Yeah, including the recodes on the, negatively. So you always want, when you're creating the scale, for the items to be all in the same direction. So some of them have to be reverse coded.
Yep.
And so that specific, so there's no guesswork for you.
You know exactly what items.
Go to the user guide and you'll see which items you have to recode before you create scales. Yeah.
That's a wealth of information.
Yeah. And
those are great.
Doing a new one soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great tips. Thank you. Well, there was one clarifying question. So there is a bibliography just for papers that use this subset of data?
No, you have to use so on the HRS website under publications, you go to the link for online bibliography, and it's not dedicated just to PLQ, but it's keyworded, so you certainly can search, and it's not only keyworded, but it'll be searching within the title of papers and within the abstract text. So if you type in mastery or constraints or optimism or life events or stress, satisfaction, all these things, you're going to get at least a first go round of the papers that are using those data. What else?
Or go look at the authors who are cited in the user guide, because these tend to be authors who regularly use these data along the way. So you could always just, search for those authors.
Yeah, you can search on bibliography by author as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
But also, just a normal Google Scholar or something.
That's right. I mean, certainly if you know psychologists, in your particular area of interest, there's no harm in typing their name in, because there's an author search function. Type their name in and see. Maybe they've used HRS data and you didn't even know about it. Sociologists,
public health people.
Right. That's right. We have a wide range of disciplines using the data. So.
Great. Well, Amanda, Jacqui, and Lindsay, it's been a real pleasure learning about HRS Psychosocial today. Thanks for everyone for participating. This is the end of the program.
Thank you.
Thanks.